Ladies and gentlemen, would you please rise for the entrance of the Honorable David C. Onley, Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, and Her Honor, Miss Ruth Ann Onley. Please remain standing for the playing of the Vice-Regal Salute. Thank you. You may sit down. I'd like to bring Mahadio up, please.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here for this special keynote presentation this afternoon. It is my very, very great pleasure to welcome His Honor, Mr. David C. Onley, the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, and his wife, the Honorable, Her Honor, Mrs. Ruth Ann Onley. The Honorable David C. Onley was appointed Ontario's 28th Lieutenant Governor following a distinguished career as a broadcaster. His Honor has championed disability issues for many years and served as the chair of the Government of Ontario's Accessibility Standards Advisory Council and was an Accessibility Council member for the Sky Dome and Air Canada Centre. In his role as Lieutenant Governor, His Honor has adopted two specific causes. The first is to promote accessibility as that which enables people to achieve their full potential. The second is to continue the Aboriginal youth literacy programs implemented by his predecessor and to twin-track the programs to include a computer literacy initiative. His Honor was born in Midland, Ontario, and grew up in Scarborough. He is a best-selling author and is the recipient of the Rick Hansen Award of Excellence and the Courage to Come Back Award. He was inducted into the Terry Fox Hall of Fame and the Scarborough Walk of Fame and holds 3 honorary degrees. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable David C. Onley, Lieutenant Governor of Ontario.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate that very, very generous introduction that my staff so carefully prepared. And It is a real pleasure to be with you here today and to see many familiar faces in the audience. And I just am saying now that it's just a privilege to be with you for this biannual conference. From the outset, I would like to salute your efforts and determination. Students with disabilities right across Canada are fortunate to have NEADS in their court, advocating on their behalf and ensuring that the post-secondary education system in Canada takes heed of their special needs. I find it interesting, as we just heard from the introduction, that, and I will talk about more of this in just a few moments, about the notion of accessibility as being the overarching theme of my mandate, because this organization goes back to the original word of awareness. And essentially, that's what I believe the state is that we're at today, and that is enhancing public awareness insofar as accessibility is concerned in terms of disability rights as far as it is concerned. So in many ways, this organization has been both ahead of its time, has been a part of its time, and I see as well that you're continuing to be on the leading edge in so many important ways. There was that phrase I just used moments ago in terms of taking care of people's special needs, but Anytime I use that phrase, I'm reminded of something an American disability rights advocate said recently, and I quote, "Yes, we need support services. Yes, we need inclusive education. Yes, we need integrated employment. Yes, we need equal rights. But this is not special. These needs are based on us, people with disabilities, equal members of our communities. We are not inspirational, nor are we so-called special. We are proud people with disabilities who should push back when anyone describes us as anything but equal members of our communities." Now that's a powerful message. In fact, it's a harsh statement in many ways, but I think it's one that at least needs to be listened to and perhaps analyzed for its clarity and substance. When I became Lieutenant Governor in September of last year, I was certainly aware that much to my deep regret, that the position had long since lost the political power it had when John Graves Simcoe became the first Lieutenant Governor of then Upper Canada under the Constitutional Act. But as one commentator put it, this office does allow the vice-regal representative to, quote, "speak truth to power on behalf of those whose voices are drowned out by society." And so I think it's time to speak truth to power. And I think that's, in a very real sense, what this organization has continued to do. By the way, I was only kidding about regretting that I didn't have the power that John Graves Simcoe had in 1791. He was effectively the military governor of Upper Canada. This notion of speaking truth to power, I'm not sure, but it's a phrase that seems to pop up more and more. It was recently used in Maclean's magazine by one of their writers. I like the interpretation very much, though, because the position of Lieutenant Governor gives me the opportunity to speak truth to power, to serve the people of Ontario, and yet at the same time draw public attention to an important cause, and that is, of course, accessibility. And as the first Lieutenant Governor in Ontario with a physical disability, I've chosen accessibility as the overarching theme of my mandate, because to me, accessibility is a lot more than things such as ramps and curb cuts and all sorts of assistive devices, which thankfully have improved the lives of countless tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people right across this country. But accessibility is much more than that. It is nothing less than that which enables people to achieve their full potential. And this is equally true for people with physical disabilities as it is for people with so-called invisible disabilities. The message today, the truth is that if we are to help people achieve their full potential, then accessibility is also about breaking through attitudinal barriers. And I'd suggest to you that the most subtle of attitudinal barriers is the erroneous assumption that disability means inability. For most people with a disability, attitudes based on that myth or misperception is just about the toughest hurdle to clear, especially as it pertains to employment. Because contrary to what many employers believe, comparatively little physical accommodation or cost is ever required to bring people with disabilities into the workplace. According to research done by the Job Accommodation Network, 46% of employers spend absolutely nothing to accommodate a disabled employee, while 45% incur a one-time cost of less than $500. So myths and misperceptions like these unfortunately lead to numbers found in the most recent participation and activation limitation survey by StatsCan. And that is, they found that 49% of people with disabilities were unemployed or not in the labor force in the year 2006. That's 49% compared to 20% for the general population. Significantly, however, people with disabilities make up the largest single untapped labor group in Canada. And there's a wide body of research to indicate that hiring people with disabilities boosts the bottom line, enriches the social and economic fabric of society, and expands the taxpayer base, as well as increasing, obviously, the financial independence of people with disabilities. And that's why I take every opportunity that I can to speak to audiences drawn from the business world especially, because if the employment stats for people with disabilities are ever to improve, The first barrier to be toppled must be the attitude of employers who hesitate or even resist hiring people with disabilities. The START process, I suggest, may in fact be a better understanding of what the marketplace really is, especially in these uncertain economic times. In the U.S., for example, it's estimated that people with disabilities control aggregate annual income in excess of $1 trillion. That's an emerging market on par with the size of China. Now, this astounding assessment was reached by a not-for-profit recruiting organization based in New York called Lime Connect. Many of you may have heard of Lime. It represents high-profile clients, and on their behalf, this organization aggressively recruits the largely untapped talent pool of people with disabilities who right now are on the campuses throughout the United States. In U.S. colleges and universities, the percentage of freshmen with disabilities has more than tripled over the past 2 decades. And this fall, Lime also brought its campaign to Ontario with the objective of building connections between enlightened corporations and graduates with disabilities. Now, it's significant that Lime's clients include companies such as Pepsi and Google. These clients are aware of the staggering employment potential of people with disabilities, as well as being potential consumers of their products. Some 15% of the North American market has some kind of disability. And which company, especially in today's troubled economic times, can afford to ignore them? The answer is none, at least none that want to stay in business. What business manager is going to go to his boss and say, I have a great plan to ride out these tough economic times, and it starts by writing off 15% of our prospective consumers? Nonsense. It doesn't work. That's how you get shown the door. And I believe it's time to start addressing some of these issues in this way. In truth, it really comes down to the word attitude, which interestingly enough takes us back to the first name that this organization had affiliated with itself, and that is awareness, because it's pretty much the same thing. For years, when I was in the television industry and starting to advocate in terms of disability causes, I gave a speech entitled, Everyone Has a Disability. What is yours? And the theme that I developed in it is that the disability that many people had, and some of the people who have heard that speech are nodding as I say this, the attitude that I got to was that the attitude, in fact, was one of not seeing people with disabilities as they really are, of forming preset notions. In the speech, I'd say to people, when you meet someone with a disability for the first time, even if you yourself have a disability, what do you see? Do you see the disability, or do you see the ability of that person within? And everyone likes to say, because we all like to fib now and then, we all like to say that, oh, no, I did not see that wheelchair, and I didn't see the walker, and I didn't see the cane, nor did I see the guide dog. I didn't see any of that. I just saw the ability within. Well, that's nice, but we all know it's not true. We all see the disability. And that's great. It means that you're a perceiving individual. You just happen to have good perception. It's actually human nature to see things and wonder, why is that so? The important thing, though, is not to form a value judgment on the surface realities, but to look within and see that person as they really are, which takes a little bit of time sometimes. Other people, it takes a little more time, but that's basically all it takes. You may have heard of the name of Roger Crawford. And if you have not heard of Roger Crawford, I would urge you, after you've left here, because I see some still have computers and I don't want you Googling things while I'm speaking, but go to Google and type in Roger Crawford's name, and if you want to narrow it down somewhat further, type in the word tennis, because Roger was born with severe physical disabilities. He's a great motivational speaker right now. He was a tennis star in college and became one of the top-ranked certified coaches with the United States Tennis Association. And this is what he said in terms of his disability, which isn't perhaps as obvious as others might be. He said, the only difference between you and me is that you can see my handicap, but I cannot see yours. We all have them. When people ask me how I've been able to overcome my physical handicaps, I tell them, I haven't overcome anything at all. I've simply learned what I can't do, such as play the piano or eat with chopsticks. More importantly, I've learned what I can do. And then I do what I can with all of my heart and all of my soul. Now, those are great words to live by, and they speak to the heart. Because if everyone could learn to look beyond disability to ability, then we would, in fact, have a fully inclusive society, one in which the full range of human ability is both welcomed and supported. So it does come down to not forming value judgments, perhaps not just taking a person at face value, if you will, but spending a little more time with them. You may have heard of the fellow by the name of Bob Morris. Bob Morris works for InterServe Canada, and he often speaks at retreats or seminars. And he told a wonderful story I heard this summer about his days as a teacher. And he was teaching English at Don Mills Collegiate in Toronto in the mid-60s, I might add, and this is important, because he met an interesting young man called Jerry, who was in a grade 10 English class for students who, quote, had no plans to go to university. That was a euphemism for saying they were not able to achieve marks sufficient to get into university or to college. There, right then and there, some teachers may have made an assessment about the class, and Jerry in particular. But Bob decided to teach them about the then emerging phenomenon, the brand new term of mass media, something that exists now and we all take for granted, and frankly, most of the students in this room have just simply grown up with. But in the 60s, it was a revolutionary concept. This was before cable. This was before computers. This is when everything was black and white, including daily life. The Leafs still lost, but some things don't change. And so Bob decided to teach this class of students, and he said he wanted to quote Marshall McLuhan. So first of all, he had to explain to the students who Marshall McLuhan was, this great visionary who spoke in elliptical thought and convoluted phrases at sometimes, but still a great genius. And Marshall McLuhan was quoted as saying, and this is the quote that he presented to his class of kids who would not be going on to college or university, "We don't know who first discovered water, but we're pretty sure it was not a fish." Well, Jerry did not get the point at all. And the easy thing for Bob to do at that very moment would have been to explain it to him, just given him a quick explanation and then pressed on to the next level. But he said, "Jerry, why don't you think about it overnight, come back tomorrow, and we'll see what you've been able to work out." So he did. Lo and behold, the next day, they got back to class, and Jerry was already sitting in his seat, his hand waving in the air practically. He was so excited with his answer. And so Bob said, "Okay, Jerry, what do you think Marshall McLuhan meant?" Jerry stood up and in a very firm voice said, "The fish's environment is water. It is his worldview. The thing we are least conscious of is our own context, the environment in which we live and move. So the fish would be the last one on earth to, quote, discover, unquote, water. It's virtually all he knows." And he sat down, and you could have heard a pin drop. People were so shocked with the answer. Bob, when he recovered himself, said, "Jerry, this is absolutely spectacular. That is I'm going to give you an A++ for that answer. It's so perfect. How did you possibly come up with it?" And Jerry said, "It's simple. I went home and I phoned Dr. McLuhan." He talked to me for over half an hour, and he kept explaining it to me until I understood it. Well, good for Dr. McLuhan. Good for Dr. McLuhan for taking that time. Good for Bob Morris for taking the time and not making a value judgment. And that was some 40 years ago. I have no idea where Jerry would be right now. He would be pretty close to my age, somewhere in his mid-50s. But I suspect, whether he went on to higher education or not, Jerry has been a great success. Bob did not form a value judgment about him. It would have been very easy, but he didn't. There's another great story I have to share with you about Dr. McLuhan. It has nothing to do with my speech, but it's a great story because it's true. McLuhan did speak in kind of obtuse terms, as you may know, and parking for the University of Toronto downtown campus is at an absolute pre-minimum and always has been. And one day Dr. McLuhan came to his parking spot and found that someone had taken it. So he left a note in the windshield and it said, "This is my parking spot. Do not park here again or I will have your vehicle towed away." Signed, Marshall McLuhan. The next day he came back and the parking spot was empty and he thought, good, the guy got the message, and he parked his car and he went about his business and came out and found a note on his windshield. And this one said, "Dear Dr. McLuhan, thank you very much. I got your note and I will not park in your parking spot again. And let me just say, this is the first thing you've ever written that I've understood." True story. But as we go back to Jerry, and as we go back to Bob, and as we go back to Marshall McLuhan, and taking that extra time, it's the message that I take around the province, urging people to look beyond disability when they are hiring or interacting with people with disabilities. They have the same work ethic as others, and all they need is for employers to give them the opportunity to show their talents. In fact, it's extremely unlikely that I would even be here today if someone had not done just that very thing for me. Because I was one of the first physically disabled people on television in the Toronto market for some 22 and a half years, I was often referred to as a role model. And it's true that by appearing in people's living rooms for over 2 decades, a lot of Ontario viewers became used to the idea of a person with a visible disability in a high-profile public role. But it was the former president of City TV, Moses Neimer, who actually is the role model for employers because he took the chance 23 years ago by hiring me for that position. He saw past the disability and chose to see the ability, my ability to do the job. And as Albert Einstein once said, setting an example is not the main means of influencing others, it is the only means. Earlier this summer, I attended an event in Bracebridge, and the town crier introduced me with a unique description of attitudes towards disability. I love town criers. Usually they're tremendously overweight people who wear bright red jackets and tri-cornered hats, and they ring bells and they say things like "Oyez, oyez, oyez," and no one knows what it means, but everyone listens. And this fellow was not only the town crier, he was also the MC, which is very unusual because he acted and he read my introduction as was just read moments ago, and he really put on a tremendous show. But he had taken the time to come up with a unique description, which he read to the audience, and I was so impressed I asked him to send it to me. He said that accessibility could be compared to the common everyday door, the door that we pass through to leave our place of residence today, the door that we pass through to get into this hotel or to use any of the facilities here, and then posed a series of questions, and I would like to repeat them right now. Can the blind find the door? Can the arthritic hand turn the doorknob? Can the person with an arm injury push the door open? Can those with mobility devices actually pass through the door? And the most important question, are those without disability prepared to open the most important door of all, the door to their minds? And that's what it comes down to. Wow, indeed. What it comes down to is helping people, those who are stuck right now in the door of disability. If we do, then it is we, regardless of who we are, regardless of our own personal challenges in life, it is we who then turn their disability into ability. So as the Ontario's first Lieutenant Governor with a physical disability, I'm going to continue to urge employers to look beyond disability, to see the limitless possibility within all people, and I'll also remind them of what you here are doing to improve the lives and the future of the next generation of Canadian leaders. In the name of the Queen, I applaud everyone at NEADS for over 2 decades of helping young people with disabilities achieve their goal of full access to higher education. I wish you a very productive conference, and I look forward to working with your leadership in the months and the years ahead as we seek our common objectives. Thank you very, very much.